Welcome to the Mayoral Forum. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Andria Tupola. I will be moderating today, and I was able to collect questions from Westside residents, North Shore residents. Some of the questions will be very general about what our hopes are for this incoming mayor and what kind of things that we hope would change, what kind of issues that we would like them to address so that we know that our quality of life will be first and foremost in their mind. I was very grateful that Rick Blangiardi was able to say yes to being a part of this, and I want to welcome him today. Welcome, Rick, and go ahead and take a few minutes to introduce yourself.
Andrea, thank you. And I don't know if I want to take a few minutes. I'm so eager to really engage your questions. So, but that said, my name is Rick Blangiardi, and I find myself now to be a finalist and hopefully the next mayor. We've got a couple of weeks left to go, and we'll see, but we're feeling more confident by today that people are responding to our message and have been. I'm very excited about that because you can obviously tell, for those of you who may be hearing me for the first time, I didn't grow up here. I didn't have the privilege of being born here. I came here at a young age in 1965. I was 18 years old, and ever since then, my heart has been here. And I grew up here in so many ways, attended university, undergraduate and graduate school, and spent my 20s as a college football coach at UH, became the associate head coach, defensive coordinator. I was doing great as a coach. We weren't making any money in those days. I had a pregnant wife, but rather than take a mainland coaching job, I decided to stay in a place that I was really in love with and reinvented myself and got into the television business. And that lasted 43 years. And I'm really proud of that career. The last 10 years I spent as the general manager of Hawaii News Now. We started that from its inception out of a broken economy in 2008, brought all of the broadcast ownerships to their knees. This was a horrific recession. And out of that, we built a 21st century multimedia company for Hawaii, populated with some of the most talented men and women I've ever worked with anywhere. All of that to say that I made this decision a little bit before Christmas a year ago because I started as a referendum on leadership. My work in broadcast wasn't just solely that inside our building, and extensive work out in the community, pretty much aware of a lot of the issues. I mean, when you have the lens of a newsroom, that's sort of an eye on Hawaii each and every day, but it was also my own personal involvement, especially on the subject of homelessness. That said, I made this decision really with my heart, more so than my head. I just turned 74 a month ago. I feel pretty good. I haven't been 74 before, but I bring a love and a passion to this job that I want to assure you is going to be first and foremost in my caring for this place and the things that the mayor's office can do. But I also bring a career of being in the senior positions. I've been CEO, president of two national broadcast companies while I lived on the mainland. I ran major market television stations. A body of work here in Hawaii has always been in service to the public and to the people of our island and our state, really. So I bring all of that with an energy and an excitement because despite the daunting aspects of what we're feeling right now with COVID-19, there's a silver lining here. There's a chance for us to come out of this and work together and do things that maybe before we couldn't get done, but now we need to for the greater good for all of us. So I'm looking forward to leading in that kind of a situation and making great things happen. And the last thing I'll say, and I'm not pandering, I am so excited about being able to work with Andria Tupola, who I've long regarded as one of our really bright stars in the state. And knowing full well that she's going to be involved with this district. What I don't know today, I have total confidence that this young lady will be a great resource to make sure I do know it. And I really plan on working with her. And I've told her privately, without being presumptuous, because she's there, I'm not there yet, that I'm looking forward to doing great things with her, especially in her district. I know how meaningful that will be for everybody listening to this call. So with that, Andrea, let's get into it. Is that okay?
Yes, that's great. No, that's awesome. So for all of you joining us, you know, we have Rick Blangiardi here. My name is Andria Tupola. I was a legislator for the West Side. I'm currently the incoming city council member. And today's forum is really about questions about how Rick would handle certain issues. We were able to actually reach out to Keith Amemiya, and he was not able to attend, but we are just gonna fill these questions out and see where Rick is. So my very first question, this is gonna be a softball for you, really. What is your priority for your first 100 days in office?
Yeah, well, you know, I've been asked that question, and quite honestly, things are so fluid, but I kind of go back to really the basics, if you will. First and foremost for me, Andrea, is going to be the men and women who are going to be on the team. I mean, that's always been a key to my success. I'm not going to do this job alone. I mean, I've said publicly, I'm asking for the responsibility of the city and county, and certainly I want to be held accountable. I've always done that in my life, but this job is going to be done by a lot of men and women. And I'm excited about bringing in that leadership team, and even for that matter, determining who's going to stay. Then the other thing that's going to hit us right in the face right now coming out of this pandemic is what are we going to do in the back half of the 21 budget? You know, for the last 7 or 8 years here, we've been tax and spend. We've had a robust economy, low unemployment, record-breaking tourism year after year, and expenses in the operating budget have increased about 5% a year. We have to learn to live within our means. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the waste and the redundancy or anything else we can possibly do to save money on the 21 budget, because as you well know, 60 days later, just 60 days in office, we have to present to the council for approval the 2022 budget. So I'm not going to wait till 22 to do that. And I'm a firm belief that right now, you know, we need to learn to live within our means, but that doesn't mean cutting anybody. It's just going to take a look at the waste, the redundancy, the variable expenses we don't need, taking the budget as a policy statement on what we do value, making the priorities that we want to put in place and funding them accordingly. And that's then the other thing that has to happen, but it's not going to happen in the first 100 days, but we'll go at it right away, is the Department of Planning and Permitting, which is so integral to making things happen, both in the construction sector and for individuals and just the creation of jobs. We know it's been well established, it's been broken for a long time. So much so that last year in 2019, the city conducted a very extensive audit, and they in turn presented those findings to the mayor on January 3rd of this year. I don't think much has been done there from what I know, but it clearly outlines in great detail all the elements of dysfunction. So we're going to lean into that right away, starting with leadership, modernization, numbers of people in the department. I'm even willing to take a look, and I've already talked to a few engineers, as to whether or not a Department of Planning and Permitting should all be together. Maybe we should possibly entertain splitting them. You know, on the island of, talk to Derek Kawakami, on Kauai, rather, I'm sorry. It takes 17 days to get a permit. They've split it over there, you know, and we have to be open to doing new and different things. And so every developer, and for that matter, homeowner who's trying to remodel a garage will tell you that time is money. And so we want to get on with the business of our recovery here. That's tied to an economic comeback, right? Thank God, you know, even though we've had a number of people get sick and people die, we're relatively healthy coming through this. It's all the other stuff that's broken. And this is one of the things that could really help us get on our way.
Thank you. So that was 1, he's going to build the team. 2, he's going to work on the budget. And 3, he's going to go at DPP. So for those of you who are asking and wondering, that was actually one of the questions that was submitted, was in regards to the Department of Planning and Permitting. For people, individuals in my district, simple things like adding a bathroom, remodeling things. I mean, that's the level of impact that the Department of Planning and Permitting has. So I'm glad to hear that that's in the forefront of your mind. The next question is in regards to facilities in the community. So Kolaloa is an underserved area. With coming rain seasons, Waiahole Stream will overflow and be impassable. When will Waiahole Bridge be repaired? When will that be a priority? And I'll just kind of add in a west side question in there. We have canals that need to be cleaned as well. So DFM, Department of Facility Maintenance, they're the ones that go in and they're supposed to make sure that these stay clean. What is going to stay or change in DFM so that we can get these facilities fixed?
You know, I can't tell you when we're going to be able to fix the bridge right now, to be honest with you, because that's something we'll look at. But I do know, and I said this on the day that I announced I was running for mayor. I said, there's an old adage that says you can tell a lot about somebody and what they value by where they write their checks. And I can tell you that early on, before COVID, I had more people say to me, you know, Rick, if you could just fix the potholes and some of our infrastructure problems and make us feel safe, you'll be a hell of a mayor. You know, if you could clean up some of our beaches and parks and let our family be able to take them down there, that's great. If you turn on the damn water for our baseball field so our kids can play, I've heard those kinds of things. So I'm telling you, as we go to looking at the budget, to not only find waste and whatever else and live within our own means, and even possible revenue opportunities, I want to make as a priority these kinds of things, because I think that psychologically in our community, this is going to be a kind of a time of healing. It's been interesting, just 24 hours after tourism began yesterday. I was at Hawaiian Airlines this morning. And, you know, it's that sort of that coming out of a dream almost kind of thing. And even though it's baby steps, it's the same thing. I think, as I said, I've said all along, and it's always been my leadership style, people are going to judge you by what you do. So right now, we know we've got people who feel fearful and uncertain. Part of that transition now as we go forward is getting our people back to work, but also creating some hope. And part of the way we can create hope is through our actions. And I want to look to do those things that I know are going to resonate with the people who live there because it's so important to them. So money will be finite. There's no question. I'm talking about being able to operate with even less money. But this is what I know about a city budget. It becomes your policy statement on what you prioritize. So you can hold monies back, redirect monies, and allocate accordingly. And I really want to do it for things like that in communities like you're talking about, because I know that that's such a huge thing to do. And it's the least we can do for the people, especially given the fact that we've all been going through this unbelievable protracted period of really suffering. So I want to do those things in that spirit.
Well, and I'll let my district know that if Rick becomes the mayor, I will be walking him out to the canal that needs to be cleaned. And if it doesn't get cleaned, I'll make him stand there so he can smell it. So these are
Yeah.
important things because I'm an on the ground type of person.
You know what? I'm so glad you said that because I'm going to rely on that. I know I'm going to go to school on a lot of things with you, but that's, you know what? That's why you got elected the way you got elected. And that is that referendum. And this is about leadership. And that's why I'm really excited because I know how passionate you are, also how knowledgeable you are, and how much of a do person you are, can do person. So, yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you. So next question is about DTS, traffic, broken lights, missing crosswalks, lights that aren't synchronized, inefficient blocking of lanes, all affect our quality of life. Who are you thinking about leading DTS and what things need to change to improve our roads?
Well, I don't have a name for somebody for DTS, and I'll be open if anybody on this call has somebody they want to suggest. But I would tell you this, we live in a place where we actually have more cars on our road on Oahu than we have people. And we know that, and congestion's been a problem. And I, like everybody else, have been stuck in more traffic jams, and you know, it's maddening sometimes just on simple commutes. You know, I mean, the lights aren't even synchronous. So one of the things that's happened, and I have yet to take a tour, maybe you have, Andrea, of the new traffic management center, this, you know, bazillion dollar, I'm exaggerating thing, but it cost a lot of money. It was years in the making, years in coming. I got to believe as we look to areas where we're modernizing ourselves out of absolute need, where technology can help move us forward, that that particular place can really help a lot in what's happening. You know, for all that we're talking about the possibilities of rail and you know, how many cars may or may not come off the road, et cetera, on the commute, I think, you know, one of the things that really seldom gets talked about is better traffic management, just from the standpoint of having lights synced and not having broken lights and so on and so forth. So again, that speaks to the welfare, the health and well-being of our people. I don't know, honestly, I don't know why things are in such disrepair. They just seem to be, and candidly, I've been out, you know, to the west side of the island where I think there's been a real disconnect. And what I listen to, people there feel like it's almost the land that's been forgotten. And I don't understand that. And I'm going to challenge you again in a positive way in your leadership. It can't be the land. And I will not be a Honolulu-centric mayor. I promise you that. Not only will I spend time every month and however many days we decide to do it out at Hale Kapolei, but I want to be out there, especially making things like we're talking about happen. That's just, we owe that to the people.
Yeah, and it's simple things. You know, I would share with those of you who are listening, crosswalks are a big deal. Making sure that the streets in front of our schools and, you know, streets are part of the city plan. Stoplights are managed by the city. So I'm glad that Rick is thinking on that. I'm going to continue on with some traffic related questions. This has more to do with the DMV Satellite City Hall because it is a mess. And this is specifically what this viewer submitted. Our satellite city halls are a mess, exclamation mark. Can we put more car registration machines in the Foodland stores in Laie, in Pupukea? You know, we have a satellite city hall in Waianae where you never know when the hours are. Sometimes they randomly close. There's not even a place to pull out numbers. So do you have thoughts about the satellite city halls or ways we can expedite this?
Well, you know, they shouldn't be a mess, first of all. So I don't know what's going on there, but I can tell you this. I registered my car at Safeway this year, you know, and I was blown away at the simplicity of that because I've gone to DMV and stood in lines and did all that crazy stuff before. So again, this is modernization possibilities. You asked in one part of the question if we could put more of those and other stuff. I don't know why they're not there. It doesn't seem like that's a really hard fix to do, but clearly DMV, look, Hawaii News Now, we did countless stories on DMV, on satellite city halls, and the people's complaints said it's not a new problem. I think we'll take a look at it and see what we can do to make it better. Again, this is in service to the public that lives here. People deserve to have that, and especially when you consider the logistics of getting around our island. That's why you have these satellite city halls, to make it feasible for people it should be able to work. Let's make the things that work that should be working. I don't want to oversimplify, but honestly, come on, how hard a problem is that to fix? It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, right?
It
I'll
shouldn't
ask
be.
my last question about traffic and car related issues. The county tax on our vehicle registration, weight tax, by the way,
Yeah.
highest amongst all the counties. What is your thoughts on this exorbitantly expensive registration fee we have to pay?
Yeah, you know what? We've done a couple of things along the way, right? We've been taxing and spending, and then we've also done this insidious things with fees. I don't know enough about the weight. I've seen some charts on that. I don't know what can be done there, but we're going to look for every possibility of creating some incentives, possibly lowering some things if we can, where we can. I think that's why I'm anxious to get to work on where the waste are, so we can take a look at that, because we shouldn't look. We've every Andrea, I've been on so many Zoom calls and all through this whole campaign circuit, and you as well. And the whole issue of affordability, not just in housing, across the board, and all these other little things that just creep up on everybody, that at the end of the day add up to a fact that people just can't afford. Our demographics have shifted. One out of every two people, I think it's going to be even more, families rather, live paycheck to paycheck. You just can't keep piling on. So, we've got to find ways. I'm going to say it again. That's why I'm I have a lot of confidence, I think, in our ability, and you're going to be a part of that, at finding waste. And rather than having to go back to people to add on costs in their living to eliminate those wastes, and I'm going to say it for like the fourth or fifth time, let's learn to live within our means, and it's going to be a form of belt tightening.
That's awesome. And I brought that up because it's one of the things that people complain about, of us having the highest registration fee in the nation. So I will make sure that we stick to that and hold Rick to his commitment if he becomes our next mayor.
Yeah, I'm not just saying this. I'm going to say, I'm really clear about that. I've lived here long enough. I mean, 55 years is long enough. I may not have been born here to know that, those kinds of fees really mount, and they really make a difference, and they become more than just problematic. And we need to pay attention to that.
Thank you. So I'm going to take off from that question and go into homelessness. In 2012, there were 4,353 people experiencing homelessness. We are now 8 years later, 4,448 people experiencing homelessness, which means there has been virtually no significant change. What are you going to do differently about homelessness, and how do you affect that change as mayor?
Well, I really appreciate this question, and I'm going to try to answer it as succinctly as possible. But just start off with the point in time count, and just the coincidence, if you will, of 8 years later, or the flat line. First of all, that's a bogus number, and anybody involved in homelessness, in homeless service providers and the people I've worked with, and maybe I should just say this. More than any other factor, this is pre-COVID, my decision to run for mayor had to do with my frustration, beyond frustration, in working in the homeless area, having an enormous sense of responsibility and compassion, if you will, for the circumstances, and yet no authority. And so I really felt like I wanted to make a difference here, because I don't know how many people are aware of what I've done over the last, even going back to when Abercrombie was governor. Neil would tell you that. But we've made little strides. And the fact that the point in time count, which is a bogus number anyway, so it's really, most experts will tell you it's a minimum of 3 times that. And it's even more so within the chronic homeless, okay? And yet there are a lot of good projects out there. We were just out in Wyandotte, as you know, with James Koshiba and Hui Aloha, and what Twinkle's done, and different creative things, and the homelessness and houselessness, and what can we possibly do, and what is the innovation, and what can we do to help, right? So I want to do a lot with that, because I know right now that there's great people involved, IHS, Connie Mitchell, I love, just the whole Partners in Care and all those well-intended people, but everything has been kind of disjointed. But the thing I'm really interested in is our chronic homeless situation. It's said repeatedly, Andrea, it's not a crime to have lost your home. It's not a crime, to be poor. It's not. And it's certainly not a crime to be mentally ill or have a drug addiction, but we need to be able to help people who cannot help themselves. And here's the deal, in my mind, and this goes back to even when I was with Governor Abercrombie. At the end of the day, even if it's 15,000 people, we have the willingness and the courage to say it's 3 times statewide what you just said, which is what they report, which I know is bogus. That's still a scalable problem. It's 1% of our population. And yet I can tell you from research we did at Hawaii News Now and News Research, and the 5 studies we've done since I've been running for office, homelessness comes up every single time, even in the midst of this pandemic, as the number one thing in people's minds. That's because I think we're a compassionate people and we understand that, and people just don't want to have that. I mean, and look, it used to be chronic homelessness maybe was contained to a couple of places, especially Chinatown and Kakaku, we had the park and whatever. And I know there have been other people, but we have to accept the fact that we haven't had the mental health services. We're living with remnants of people from an ICE epidemic, from an opioid epidemic that are out there. Plus you've got other renegades and whatever and just in there. And now it's no longer just contained to those areas. It's become pervasive. It's in a lot of places. And people are threatened by it, not just from a safety standpoint, but when you're dealing with people, you can't predict what they might do. It's dangerous. And you got older people who are afraid to walk down the sidewalk. And then you've got COVID and all the other health risks. If you talk to the police department, they really have gotten turned in town at least, into almost being social workers. And many of them even have to change their uniforms because when they go out and work with these people, because it is, if you've ever been in the doorways, it's not very sightly. I mean, these people have, body sores, and I don't want to get too graphic on this call, but it's tough, okay? We need to address the people who can't help for themselves, take advantage of our laws, but also redirect money so we can put services in place. And I'm a big believer in rehabilitation, but some of these people may not be totally rehabilitated, but we don't want to leave them on our streets because they can't be, and we need to provide services for them and whatever. And I've seen actually some real miraculous things. I love the Habilitat program. I love the Sand Island Treatment Center. And the reason why Arthur Shujima, the retired CEO from Queens, is my co-chair is because I worked extensively with Art when Queens was overrun and lost $95 million because of homelessness at developing that H4 project in Ivaley. We've got one in Kaneohe. You and I talked to James out there in what they want to do at Huialoha and that project. There's a lot of innovative things we could do. If the city can be a catalyst in that, we will be, okay? Because I would tell you, for me, it goes so against our root culture to seemingly be so tolerant of that, and we shouldn't be. We should be intolerant of it. We should be saying, we need to do something about this and really make a difference instead of doing these bogus reports. It's clear that compassionate disruption doesn't work. And if we even wanted to buy those numbers for a second, and it's the same 8 years later, what an indictment that is about the fact that everything's not working right. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, how else do you say it? Where's the improvement? 8 years? Where is the improvement? I'm not saying that to disparage Kirk Caldwell. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I get off on
No,
this. Sorry.
There's definitely a lot to be said about it, and I'm glad that you're very passionate about it. It's something that affects my community, and it's something that I'm very active in. So I look forward to working with you on that. My next question.
Gandhi had a great quote, and I don't usually quote Gandhi here, and I'm paraphrasing, forgive me. But honestly, from my moral fiber, it simply says that, a society is judged by how it takes care of its most vulnerable. One of the things I've always loved and felt so privileged to live in Hawaii is that aloha spirit, the caring, the sense of ohana, or whatever. Here, we have really vulnerable people, and we've got to a point right now where we just can't be looking the other way. We need to be doing something about it and attacking the systemic issues. That's the last thing I'll say on it. I'm sorry, but I just want
No.
this runs deep with me. This is my belief system on this one.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing that. It's important for me that people know where you stand on homelessness and what your perspective is. So a lot of this occurs, in inland, it also occurs on the beaches. And I want to ask you a question about beach access, because we just had a huge issue in my community with blocking beach access. And we've had problems across the island of Oahu with the city and county blocking beach access to the public. What is your stance on public beach access, and will you be prohibiting it or limiting it if you're elected mayor?
And I'm not pandering to Andrea because I know where you stand. So I'm going to stand right beside you and say, on this island, in this place, I believe people should have access to our parks and our beaches. Okay, plain and simple. I think we also need to take better care of them where we need to take care of them so they're really accessible. But I am not going to engage in that practice. Okay, I'm not.
Thank you. Thank you for your support for open public access. And let me ask a follow-up question about parks. So we have parks across Oahu that have been not taken care of, dilapidated, maybe left. I'm not sure if some of them they're thinking about taking care of them at a later date, but it's one of the things that a lot of families are directly affected by when lights are broken, when basketball courts aren't improved, when grass is dead. So what is your thoughts about Department of Parks and Recreation, and how do you go about improving that?
Well, it starts with leadership. We're going to need a different leader in there. Okay. And I'm not here to talk about anybody's in a job right now or sound off if they should have become aware of it, that we're going to fire anybody walking in. But I will tell you right now, I know that our Department of Parks and Recreation can be done a lot better. Okay. And so I just yesterday I was in Ever Beach and looking at, what should be some really good parks with water available. They're not even turning on the water. I mean, absolutely crazy, right? So I just got off a phone call, a Zoom call with the Young Professionals Organization, with all these young people, and they were doing some polling, which made it interesting about asking the audience. We had over 200 people. How many people were thinking about leaving? And 53% said they were thinking about leaving. These are all young professionals. And and a high percentage, to my surprise, even own their own home right now. These are young people making some good money, younger people, they're already, and why they've lost that value proposition. We start to think about, and I use the word systemic seemingly a lot here, but we start to think about, what the aspirations are, wanting to keep people here, have families here, whatever. Where's the quality of life issues? Parks and beaches and access are all really important to that, and all the things that happen from that. I mean, for me to be out there, I still remember covering in Hawaii News Now, Ever Beach's Little League teams and all the pride it brought to that community. Why wouldn't we have the parks? I mean, we wonder why we end up having some of the social discord that we have, or where we lose young people early on, almost to a point of no return, which is so scary for people, parents raising kids or whatever. You want to build community. We talk about building community, and they talk about the rail transit line, they talk about TOD, and they talk about all the tax benefits, all that's good. That's all inanimate, and it's all real. I'm not denying that. But we got to also think in terms of how people live and what are we doing for them, especially where we live in such an incredibly beautiful place. So, far be it for me to start talking about the INA here, but I feel that we should be doing that, but we should be doing that because that's the right thing to do. And we've got to find monies to do that. And I know we can do a better job. It may take us however long, several years or whatever, but we can start on that stuff. We can start making a big difference. And I'm going to say it again. To me, that'll be part of the healing process. The other thing that I believe, with a little bit of support and subsidy from the city, if we get behind it, we'll get a lot of people there who want to help with that cause. And I just think that'll be really wonderful in building community. So I want to go from fear and uncertainty to hope, to ultimately bringing people to feeling confident. So how do you do that? You do that through actions, and you do it through very deliberate things that become something that people really get. So I feel
No,
very
I totally agree. When we had parks that needed help, our local businesses stepped up. They paid for porta potties. Some of them paid to go and trim the grass at the field. There is no lack of desire from the community to want these parks to improve. So I'm glad to hear that you're open to that, because I've actually given the city references of businesses that were ready to pay for lighting, for crosswalks, but they would not have it. And I understand there's a procurement process and many other things that had to be considered, but the ownership that we feel over our communities and the way that we take care of this place we call home, it builds a sense of pride. This is the reason why people would stay, is if they're able to say, hey, I took care of this area and this place is, is special to us because even the city takes care of it. So it's been a missing piece for many years.
Yeah, and I agree. And I won't talk so fast. I get fired up about this, but it is so profound in the psyche of people as individuals in a community. And I'm glad you brought up the private sector. Not all of this has to come. And I've talked about belt tightening a few times now on the thing, but we need to better help from the state. We need better collaboration there. I actually think under this CARES thing, we can even get federal monies that we could be appropriating for some of this stuff here, because it's also, but I also think the private sector, as you just alluded to, would be willing to help out a lot more. And I want to look to have that kind of collaboration. So I'll tell you, I said earlier, we've all been it's been so heavy to be in this pandemic, right? But I'm excited about the opportunity to lead in this situation and start creating really good things, making good things happen.
Well, thank you for your answer on that. And going along with schools, and I know you don't have purview over public school education, but it is on the forefront of every family's mind during this pandemic, the access to better public school education, equal access, whether charter, whether homeschool, whether public school. What is your stance, just so that people know your thoughts about education?
Well, I think it's all about education, right? I'm an old educator. I went to graduate school, and I know you were a teacher as well. I'm an old football coach, but I've always been involved in educator. I'm a father of three. I mean, you raise three children. And all my kids are grown. They all went all the way through college, but you really learn firsthand, just beyond your own adolescence and your personal experience. I've been a trustee in the Public Schools of Hawaii Foundation for the last 14 years. I looked at a lot of really good things. I'm very proud about public schools. And I will tell you, I've had a lot of consternation over this distance learning right now, because I don't think that that's been, for a lot of people, a very enriching experience. And we're going to have to, only time will tell, how much has happened. But I want to provide the best access. We have a very unusual situation here with a statewide Department of Education, but I'm a very strong proponent of public education. I don't believe sort of in that polka dot prosperity. We don't have exact purview, but if there's anything I can do from the city and county, starting with preschool education, or anything we can do involved. In fact, one of the things I really intend on being, we haven't even talked about it, but it's related, is nobody's talking about childcare. And women are bearing the brunt right now. If we're going to talk about economic recovery, they're bearing the brunt, having to choose between jobs and who's going to take care of their kids, and the impossible task of that. So I think the city, it's not a state issue, where I may not be able to control the schools. I intend to get very involved as part of economic recovery in subsidies, whether it's through the CARES Act or other monies, for child care options, because we've got to get our women back in the workforce. Hawaii News Now, not KGMB, and Hawaii News Now, which was KGMB, 51% of my employees were women, In fact, that was the best 51% of the whole, they were really, so we had a lot of single young moms and stuff. So we're not talking enough about that, but I want to be able to do that. But we need to get our kids back in school, and anything that the city can get involved with to help, even in preschool, like I say, I want to do that. I mean, it's all about education. It is. Look, I wouldn't be here today as a finalist for the mayor. I grew up in a bilingual household. Okay, my parents, my father was born here. My father was the oldest of seven. My mother was the youngest of nine. She had an 8th grade education. It was a blue collar family. I was the first in my family to go to college, and that changed my life. And that was only because my mother, who was the youngest of nine, in a family that the idea of growing up was that you either join the military or you learn the trade. I mean, that was like what you looked at, provided you didn't quit high school earlier to get a job for economic reasons. So for me, education on a very personal level, now that I'm 74 years old, has made all the difference in my life. So in such a profound way, that's why I've served on the Public Schools Foundation and everything else. If you look at the nonprofit work I've done, so much of it has been youth oriented, because you catch them at the right age, it makes all the difference, right? So
Yes.
yeah, I couldn't believe in it anymore. I don't know what else to say. I wish I had more of a hand in it,
Well, thank you so much for your commitment to education and for all your work that you've done. My next question is in regards to taxes, which actually affect families and quality of life. The city is looking into levy yet another monthly tax fee for the creation of storm drain utilities. There's also property taxes that also are affecting families. So what is your stance on taxes, whether it be property taxes or trying to levy more taxes for
Yeah.
storm drainage utilities?
Okay, so taxation is a very complicated subject. I tend to have some really good budget people around me who understand it. But fundamentally, for all the things we're talking about with respect, whether it's affordable housing or the increased cost of Hawaii, pricing people out of paradise, et cetera, but especially coming out of a pandemic, we're not going to raise property taxes. And I don't believe in these insidious fees, even on sewers and what others. So I've said several times throughout today, we've been living with a tax and spend operation. And while times were good and we had low unemployment and tourism was bringing in all kinds of money, maybe you could get away with that. But right now, we have to look at our future very differently than we looked at our recent past. We need to change practices. I want to find the money. I'm going to find the money to pay the bills we have to pay and not increase fees and taxes. Not now, and who knows for how long. There's at least probably several years at a minimum before we would even entertain that. That's only the right thing to do. Otherwise, Andrea, you probably know this, and it came up earlier today in another meeting I was in. The University of Hawaii has already reported, and the Star Advertiser did a story just 2 weeks ago on the front page of the Sunday paper about the 2,000 families we've already lost. And we've already had negative population growth for the last 4 years to begin with, pre-COVID. But they're projecting we could lose another 25 to 35,000 people next year because of no work. And maybe some of those will be the people I just got off the phone with and these young professionals, but there are other people who just, you've been working minimum wage jobs and having 3 to 4 salaries. In other words, they're all working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. At some point, you break under that strain. You just can't do it. If there's nothing there, you just say, the hell with it. I don't want to leave, but I'm leaving. And we don't want that. That is, you want to talk about something that's so disruptive to the fabric of our communities and to families and how that tears people apart, having people forced to leave for economic reasons. So why could we even talk about, under these circumstances, any notion of raising taxes anyway, or doing anything that's going to add to a higher cost of living? I'm against that.
Thank you. I'm also allergic to taxes. So it's always been my stance that with every decision that's made from administration or even me as a representative should always consider the cost of living, because my vision, even when I ran 2 years ago, was to create a Hawaii where more local families could afford to live here. And if we have decision makers who understand that vision and make decisions along that thinking, then we will actually hopefully be able to keep families here and maybe even attract families back. So staying on that question about families and safety, in July of this year, there were some game rooms that were discovered in residential communities. And in fact, in Kapolei, the residents had to rally round to really get some support to take that game room out. And it's something that we actually have all throughout the coast as well. Do you have a stance on game rooms? Crime is going to be something that you're going to be over if elected mayor. What is your stance?
Well, I don't know much about game rooms. I remember hearing about that. I don't know how prevalent they are, but I would tell you that I'm going to be very solid on enforcement. For all the expectations right now about coming in and being a charismatic leader and building teams and all the things that I believe in and that I do and whatever. But I think also part of the expectation in this job is somebody who's going to be decisive and be a bit of an enforcer, whether we're talking about monster homes, illegal vacation rentals, game rooms, or any of the other stuff that we have to do. That's part of what's been lacking. So I would be supportive of anything at all that's disruptive to the fabric of a community like that. And if that's how people felt, we'd engage the police and do whatever. I can just tell you that I think that our lack of enforcement on some things is also added to the distrust, because it's like, who cares? Does anybody care out there, right? And so you can't have trust when people feel that way. And I can tell you right now, I think the primal screen for the people around is they want a leader, they want somebody who's trustworthy, they want somebody who's decisive. And in those regards, that's what I think in owning the job you have to live up to. And so establishing trust is going to be really important. Look, in recent times, we had everything that happened with chief of police. We've had the prosecutor's office has been a disgrace. These are things that should have been shepherded. We've had other things go on, like you're talking about. At what point does the people who've been elected step in and make sure that those things don't happen? So I'm excited about the fact that the work that Susan Ballard's doing. It's only been 4 years, but it's not a perfect science. There's a lot of work to be done with our police department. They're trying to improve. I'm very excited about whether it's Steve Arm or Megan Cow, whomever gets elected as a prosecutor's office, returning to that. I'm actually excited about hiring more police officers and even detectives for that matter. That's part of the problem that we have. We have shortages there. That's job creation. It's keeping people home. So, I just think we need to protect our neighborhoods. We got so many things that need some enforcement. So on the one hand, it costs so much money to live here and everybody sacrifices. And then you have these serious breaches that really erode from everything you're sacrificing for. At some point, people just say, as I said earlier, the hell with it. I've lost that loving feeling. I don't want to leave, but this, it's become too hard. It's become too hard, We can't make.
I'll add on to what you said. There are actually 8 districts for the Honolulu Police Department, and ours is District 8, and they have talked a little bit about creating a District 9 because ours is getting huge. Kapolei being the second city, there is an increase of housing, increase of population, but same services. So same amount of police officers, same amount of hospitals. So it's been one of the issues that's been hard, is knowing that this area is so huge and there's so many people to service, but there's still the same amount of officers trying to get down to the same crime. So I am happy to hear that you're interested in addressing those issues, because it can't be the same.
No, in full disclosure, I got the Shopo endorsement and we've had a lot of conversations. So as I understand it right now, the amount of vacancies at HPD is about 315 to 320, just to give you perspective. can't fill all of those positions. And I've asked repeatedly, what would be a sustainable number, knowing that there's people retiring and different things that happen, right? And they said, well, we could pretty much make the city work well, including a district like you're talking about, if we're 200, which means we're at least 100 police officers shy. And then just last week, I talked to Chief Ballard and Malcolm Lutu, who runs Shopo, when that report came out about the number of cases that weren't being followed up on. And they told me candidly, nobody's looking to make excuses. They're accepting the responsibility. They said, Rick, it's so hard to follow up on some of this stuff. We lack 50 detectives. Well, you know, those are all pretty good paying jobs. It could be really good starter jobs or whatever. We're gonna have to increase our manpower. You know, you just can't do it. Or overtime, you're gonna burn all these people out. They work really hard to begin with. So bottom line, just like we need more people working in DPP, we need more police. We have to, so this is about job creation versus job elimination, but where your priority is. And so I'm going to be a really strong proponent of trying to really recruit good police officers to join in so we can provide, as I said earlier, people said to me, if you could just make us feel safe in our neighborhoods, you'd be a hell of a mayor. That's what we're talking about being able to do.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And the next follow-up question I have is in regards to this pandemic, our mayor has taken some stances about shutting down businesses and enforcing rules, whether it's ticketing people at beaches. And granted, if elected, you're going to be coming in January. Perhaps things will be a little different. Perhaps they'll be the same. What is your stance about how we go about addressing this pandemic while still being aware that local businesses and families need to survive?
Right. Absolutely right. So I hope that they are better. We're still 2.5 months out before either you or I get into office. That said, I've said for a long time now that we need to get our people back to work. You know, the local businesses didn't have a voice at the table. Everything was government directed. It was all top down. And somewhere in there, in the perspective of trying to balance public health, public safety with a stable economy, they forgot about the economy. And they've hurt this economy. And I just heard today, it was reported on a national newscast, reported by our own place, that 50% of Hawaii's restaurants are going to close and not reopen. 50% of our restaurants. But let me go back to our smaller businesses. And I talked earlier about the demographic shifting, and one of every 2 families lives paycheck to paycheck, and that'll probably be worse. If you look at the profile of the businesses at DBED, 95% employ 20 or fewer people. These businesses could have been operating some time ago, and it would be COVID centers. Everybody's aware of mask up and distance and wash your hands and do that, you know, but yet they got deemed non-essential while the big box guys stayed open, and they've been thriving, and Amazon's had record-breaking numbers and so on and so forth. And yet we've taken the very core, the backbone, you know, of 2/3 of our GDP, knowing full well that tourism was shut down, and we prohibited it from even having any kind of chance. And it's really hurt our restaurant business. You know, our restaurant business is a $6.5 billion business. It employs over 100,000 people. It represents 15% of our economy. That's just the restaurants alone. And that's been impacted. But how about all of the other small places? You know, so I've been saying for some time, you know, they're not mutually exclusive. This is the challenge, to balance public safety and health, at the same time keep your economy going. And they excluded that latter. And so people didn't have a voice at the table. And those businesses are the ones that had the most to lose. And that's what's happened. It's created an economic consequence. So we need to get our people back to work. And there's a little story, if you don't mind, just real quick, that I experienced last week. They want to trust local people and knowing that we'll figure it out because we have to, because of survival and economics. And they're not suddenly going to be this, you know, if we had somebody in some small shop somewhere become a COVID center, we would deal with that. But I have to believe that's not going to be the case. So I took my wife last week to Zippy's, okay, for breakfast. So we go to Zippy's, and this is a great example because I know Jason Hegan, the CEO, they went through on the second lockdown, really wreaked havoc. And they hadn't even opened up enough of their shops before. Now they're all open. So here's what happens. You go to Zippy's, you walk in, there's a woman, young woman in this case, greeted us at the door very friendly, took 2 steps in. Right there was a hand sanitizer. You had to push your foot, put your foot, hand sanitizer. Took another 2 steps. They took your temperature, took another 2 steps, and they took down your name and your phone number, okay? And then they took you to your table, which had the plexiglass and they were distance, whatever. But they figured it out right there and how they could operate and be able to operate. Hopefully they could. I don't think look, restaurants can't make it at 50%. If you listen to the NRA, break even for restaurants at a minimum of 75% occupancy. So we've even imposed on restaurants a non-sustainable model. At some point, Andrew, it's the last thing I'm going to say because we've been 8, 9 months into it. But this disease is not going away. When you and I get in office, it's not going to go away. If you listen to all the experts, and whenever I have free time, I'm trying to read, listen, whatever. This disease is with us. It's going to be with us for a while. It's not even about if and when a vaccine comes. We need to learn to live with it, manage it as people. We need to get on with it because we can't just wait to get back to zero. We have to trust our local people and our businesses here to do right and do right by each other. This is group behavior, and if we care about each other, we will do it. And I know that there's been people who violate that, but for the general good, we need to get on with our lives here. We got to get out of this malaise and allow people so they don't have to run away from here. Because I don't even know where you leave if you leave here, where you go to. Because I can tell you right now, there's nothing I'm seeing on the mainland that would ever make me want to go there. You know? So let's,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
we're
it's a heavy topic, with COVID and with everything going on. I do know that the people of Oahu are looking forward to some new leadership. So I'm glad that you had that stance on making sure that we do both, because there were many governors when this started that said it cannot be health or the economy, it has to be both. Because when people are put in financial distress, they have health problems because they're stressed, because they have anxiety. So it's been something that even in our own community, not getting answers from the unemployment office, being unemployed for months and wondering, can I make it? How many cards can I max out? So it's going to be probably at the very forefront, which I'm glad you guys are doing your budget at the onset of entering office, but it's going to be at the forefront of how is the city going to help people get on their feet?
Well, I want to say this to God's truth when I'm about to share it. I kind of alluded to it earlier, but in a way, before COVID, in the first month, I announced in February and COVID locked us down. Somewhere in February, I was out in Waianae and I ran into a young man where I was in somebody's backyard doing a little coffee hour. Actually, I was out there to introduce Augie Toba, who was having a little coffee hour. Augie asked me to come out, and I thought, well, I'm brand new in the campaign thing. I'll go out. And so anyway, I was talking to this guy. He says to me, this young man, I'm not going to say his name because I think he says, Rick, my family's from Waianae. My grandfather was from Waianae. My father was from Waianae. I grew up here. So we're Waianae people. He says, it's always been hard to live here. He said, but now it's just become too hard. Okay. And the way he said it, I understood that. This is coming out of pride, multi-generation in the community. I mean, it really struck me. And this was before COVID. So it's even become that much more so. We need to be sensitive to that. We need to be aware of that. I'm going to say this. I really think everything I anticipated about being mayor has been completely redefined as a result of COVID. And everything we're going to do right now in this economic recovery, God willing, I have 8 years in office, as everything has been redefined. If you go back and you look at the recession of 2008, if you listen to the experts, they'll tell you it took 7 years to 2015. And that was during good times, low unemployment, tourism was going up every year, still took 7 years to come out of it. And part of what drove that was we lost 1,600 businesses, which really crippled this town. We're on the brink of losing more than 5,000 businesses. And as I just said, was just reported today on national news that our own authorities said 50% of Hawaii's restaurants are closing. The results of this are not going to change in January. And anything I say today is not going to be a silver bullet or magic. We're just going to have to redirect our efforts in ways here under these circumstances that are really much more humanitarian. Get money in the people's hands. Go out and get even more money. Be smart about what we spend our money on. Make the right priorities. This is going to be about that because it's really that pervasive and that impactful.
Thank you. And just to give another question from a North Shore viewer that submitted this also has to do somewhat with funding. And I know things will be tight because you guys will be balancing that budget. But over the years, the North Shore community has been needing a recreation center. And they've asked multiple times. They're wondering if the city will partner. There's been some discussions there. Some private entities even came forward with money to create this. The question submitted was, will the city be willing to help the North Shore community get a recreation center that's been much needed?
Well, I think the operative word there is help. And why wouldn't we help? And if we can get private sector monies, I don't know how much something would cost a recreational center. I've got some ideas. I'm on the YMCA board. We just built a rec center in Waianae. Well, you're familiar with that out there.
Yeah.
And that wasn't that much money. I forget. I was on the capital committee to raise the money. It was only a couple of $1 million. I don't know what they want out there and what we would need, but if the word is help, as I said earlier, the collaboration, whether it's even with the feds, for that matter, for communities, or possibly with the private sector, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we try to help subsidize that and or try some other things that would entice the private sector to do that? That would make great sense. I would say, why hasn't that already happened? You know, that's what I would say. What? Tell me the reasons why that hasn't happened.
Yeah, and you know, as well as many people do, lots of talented athletes coming out of the North Shore. So it's one of those communities that's been waiting for something like this for years.
Yeah, we ought to go to the NFL or the NCAA and say, you guys pay for this because we've got the most incredible feeder system going. You know, I've been very involved in the Polynesian Bowl since its inception, and bringing it to television, giving our kids a chance to play on national television against the best in the country. And it's been a work of mine that I'm really proud of. And you're absolutely true. I mean, I'm being facetious about the NCAA and the NFL, but honestly, I mean, we should be supporting that. How healthy is that? How good is that? You know, you want to talk about community pride and somebody coming out of a place, and it's just good stuff. It's all good.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that question. I'm going to wrap up with a few questions about the campaign. These are less policy related, but you know, you've been kind of painted as the Trump of Hawaii, which I thought I was, but I guess you are. So whatever it is, my question to you is, you know, as you round off this campaign, how have those negative ads affected you, or how do you keep your message on point?
Well, I keep my message on point fundamentally, Andrew, because I was predetermined. I announced the day that I ran for office. One of the things I liked about it was a nonpartisan race, and Kirk was terming out, so I didn't have to bash an incumbent. So I made a promise, which you don't want to make promises as a political candidate, but I promised I would maintain civility, because quite honestly, part of what was almost a deterrent for me was I've grown really tired, especially being in the media business all these many years, with the national discord, the partisan politics. It's gone on forever. It's just not anything that I care for. And then I'm not exactly, you know, a babe in the woods here, but I actually thought if I maintain my civility, that perhaps the other side would do the same. And unfortunately, that's not been the case. So, you know, however they want to portray me, with the misrepresentations or whatever, that's it. All I know is I have a lot of people on this island, on our island, who've worked for me, hundreds of people. My reputation speaks for itself, and I am who I am. I want to stay consistent, because I think the last thing people need right now is, let's elect the guy that insults the other guy better. Let's elect the guy who's got more dirt on the other guy. This is a leadership job. Coming out of a pandemic. You know, I'd like to think that my whole career and life's work and passion for this place is what's on the line. I'm applying for a job. Resumes count, you know, and the situation is what it is. You don't need that other stuff. I'm not going to go there. Does it bother me? Yeah, it bothers me. It angers me, to be honest with you. But, you know, I'm just determined not to let that come through. But in a setting like this, I'll tell you that, yeah, I don't like it.
Well, thank you for being candid. I know exactly how that feels. Running a statewide race is hard, and you're running almost a statewide race because Oahu has the majority of our citizenship from the state of Hawaii. So it's a huge race to be running.
Yeah, and they took a nonpartisan race and made it partisan all of a sudden. And then on top of that, I got a U.S. Senator like Brian Schatz making phone calls on a mayoral election to all kinds of people, calling all kinds of favors. And you sit there and you go, well, what is this all about, you know? This is a nonpartisan race. There's a reason why the people voted for this to be nonpartisan. And the one thing I really pride myself on being able to do is not only be a team builder, but a collaborator. I want to bring people through from all sides. If I'm going to be such a staunch Democrat, does that mean I'm going to hire only Democrats? What is that all about? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I can tell you right now, in television news, the holy grail is trust. That's everything you try to do, is to get people to trust you, establish that covenant with the viewer, okay? And I know right now at City Hall, trust is absolutely necessary. And the people that I'm going to hire, I can promise you, I'm never going to ask anybody, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Because in television, I never, ever, ever asked anybody, what's your political persuasion? But I knew we were tied to creating trust together as a group. That's what it was about. So I find this notion of turning this into a partisan race just sad, plain English. Just to make it that way, I mean, that's not what we need right now.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. So last question, and then you can give a closing statement. Thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Andria Tupola. I'm glad to host this and give Rick some questions. You know, I had reached out to both Keith and Rick, asking them if they would address questions for my community, questions that people wanted to know that perhaps were not asked on debates. I got kind of specific with Rick about some things that bother our community that what we want to see addressed. And so I guess my last question is, you know, in the last two polls, it showed that you were up. And I want to know what you attribute that to. And then you can go ahead and say whatever you want to the viewers that are watching.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm encouraged by the polls, and quite honestly, I'm inspired. I'm inspired by the vote of confidence. When I entered this race, I didn't know how many people were going to run, and I didn't know how many politicians may jump in. As it turned out, we had three pretty experienced politicians to compete against. But now I find myself, you know, having won the primary, encouraged by the polls, and quite honestly believing that I am going to become the next mayor. So I've already begun that preparation work. So for me, for somebody who was just fortunate enough to come here, as I said, in 1965, who loved this place and has been loved back by this place and its people, I feel extremely honored. And I'm excited about taking everything I know and everything I've done. As I said earlier, I've always been in turnaround situations, but certainly nothing the scale of this. But I'm excited to serve Hawaii this way at this time, and something that none of us have ever experienced before, and just hope that my life's work has prepared me to help us get through this, and I can be the mayor that you want me to be. I'll try to live up to that every single day I'm in that job and not disappoint you. And that's where I'm coming from. And so I humbly ask for your vote if you haven't voted already, if you're watching this. But if you already voted and you voted for me, or even the other guy, you voted for me, I promise you I won't let you down. If you vote for the other guy, I promise you a couple of years from now, you'll say, I should have voted for him.
Well, thank you so much, Rick. It was great to be with you this afternoon. And thank you for everyone watching. You can get more information about him. What is your campaign website?
Wow, that's a good question. It's rickblangiardiformayor.com. But let me just say in closing, I'm so excited about working with you, Andrea. I think you are. I've said this before. You're more than a rock star. You represent the future of Hawaii in so many ways. I'm so glad you ran for this council position, coincidental with the time I'm stepping in. We have huge challenges, but I know you're the right person for the right place at the right time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Rick, have a great day. Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha, Andrea. Thank you.